Hi, how you doing? Let's set a simple scenario today. Let's say John and Jane Doe live on the Canadian Prairies and they want to grow a small strip of long blooming flowers in a sunny area on their front yard. And they also have a small in-ground kitchen garden in their backyard. They have 3 kids, 2 dogs, a cat. They both work. And they don't have the indoor space, the resources, the time, or frankly the energy to take care of some indoor plants for the next 2 to 3 months. Never mind trying to keep the cat out of them. What are their options? My name is Sharon, and I garden on a large yard in a small town in east central Saskatchewan, Zone 3. Welcome to my Sask Garden. Are you already struggling with starting some seeds indoors? Are you thinking you need to buy a little greenhouse? Or, you need seedling trays and seeds and soil. And then you worry about, well, when am I supposed to pot up? When am I supposed to fertilize? How much am I supposed to fertilize? When am I supposed to water? How much am I supposed to water? And maybe you haven't started yet, but really you don't have the space or time or the sufficient lighting to start seeds early. Maybe you've already started them and you're struggling with leggy seedlings and you don't know what to do. Or you've tried to start and they just won't germinate. Maybe you think you need to invest in one of those soil blocking contraptions. Or that the magic of winter sowing or the seed snail is going to be the answer to all of your troubles this year and you're busy trying to figure that out and gathering the resources for that. But here's a solid truth. Maybe, probably, a lot of those seeds don't need to be started early. Seeds have been germinating outside all on their own forever. And even in our cold climate, we have plenty of choices for direct sowing seeds outdoors. I am motivated to do this video today because there's a lot of information that circulates on social media at this time of year. It makes many gardeners believe in the absolute need to start seeds early in some manner. And I see lots of questions about seeds that absolutely do not need to be started early indoors. So today I'm here to bust that myth that you need to have an indoor nursery to have a gorgeous garden. Of course, there are reasons for starting some seeds early. Some seeds need a longer season to bloom or to set their fruit. By sowing some seeds indoors, you get a higher germination rate. You get a head start for those seeds that need the longer season to bloom or to set their fruit. Possibly you get earlier harvests. You have better quality control, and you can space out the transplants exactly how you like them. Those are the benefits of sowing seeds indoors. But as I said, plenty of choice for direct sowing outdoors, even in our Zone 3 climate. I'm not saying that starting seeds indoors is absolutely useless. As I said, there are reasons that you need to do that. However, it's not necessary to have a nice garden. Before I get into the choices that there are, I'm just going to preface this by saying that I'm not going to talk about preparing the soil because that is, of course, a given. Every seed and seedling is going to struggle in hard, compacted, nutrient-poor soil. Throwing a pack of seeds on the soil that has not been prepared in some way will give poor results. I think one of the tricks to getting a nice display from direct sown flowers is to sow a little heavier. Not every seed germinates, even in controlled conditions. You rarely get 100% germination, although I said in those types of conditions it is higher. But sowing directly outdoors does lower the germination rate even more. Planning to sow a little heavier combats that problem. And there are a lot of seed packages where you get a lot of seed. So if you're thinking that you'd like to direct sow, those are the types of packages that you want to look for, not packages with 20 seed in them. You want a package with 200 seed in them or even more. And of course you could choose seeds that actually benefit from direct sowing, and we'll get into that as well. There are quite a few reasons to do that too. Lots of plants don't like root disturbance and they just don't transplant well. Some plants grow really fast. so fast that starting them indoors is a totally unnecessary step, and it's a waste of that indoor space. So let's look at the choices. And first of all, we'll start with the flowers. There's a lot of annual flower seeds that can be successfully direct sown in our cold climate. And I'm going to start with zinnias. Zinnias absolutely can be direct sown. I have done that many times, and they will bloom by about mid-July. I've grown them both ways, starting them indoors and direct sowing. I prefer direct sowing. Even with my grow lights in my greenhouse, I find zinnia are easier to manage direct sown. You know, especially if you don't have the time or space or lighting and fans to grow zinnia. I find that they do have some trouble with fungal issues if they're not managed properly. I just like direct sowing them, and I think they're fabulous that way. As I said, for me, they will bloom by mid-July. And here's more great contenders: bachelor buttons, nigella, or it's often called love in a mist, calendula, often referred to as pot marigolds. I used to grow a lot of these. I haven't for quite some time. Poppies, they are best direct sown. Lavaterra, great plant. It's a beautiful plant, and it's very bushy. Larkspur, which is the annual form of delphinium. Dwarf marigolds, I find the tall crackerjack kind of marigolds, you can direct sow them. I just find they take a little bit longer to bloom. Cosmos, of course, they're pretty classic direct sown annual. Bells of Ireland, great direct sown annual. You actually can have trouble with them if you try sowing them indoors first. Also, sunflowers are really good for direct sowing. I think their preference is to be direct sown. They're almost weedy for me now after I've thrown some seed heads in the compost. And so I get a lot of volunteer sunflowers. And a fun fact about sunflowers is that they will actually stop growing and begin to flower as soon as their roots touch the sides of a pot, if they're container grown. That leads to flowering much shorter than they're supposed to. And the way I found that out is because I did container grow some sunflowers one year, planted them out where I wanted them to grow to 3 feet tall because they were a dwarf sunflower. They started to bloom at a foot tall, and I couldn't figure it out. They all did that. And it turned out it was because their roots were touching the sides of the container. They weren't pot bound, they weren't root bound, but the roots were definitely filling that little container, and so that did stop them from growing and sent them into bloom. They did grow a little bit more after that, but they turned into a very dwarf plant. I wasn't happy with them because that wasn't the height I wanted. I wanted them at 3 feet. So I'm not going to get into the types of sunflowers that are meant for container growing because there are, but the package of sunflower seeds that you pick up off the rack, chances are very high that they are going to be meant to be direct sown. They're going to be happier direct sown. Another one that's good for direct sowing, or probably better for direct sowing, is morning glory. Did you know morning glory won't bloom anyway until they're getting a short day length? So starting them indoors is a waste of time. They also don't like to be fertilized or have root disturbance because they have a fairly fragile root system. So if you direct sow them once, you will have morning glories in that location forever because of self-sowing. They're prolific self-sowers. And the seeds stay viable for many years in the soil. I used to grow morning glories on the fence in the backyard, and it's been many, many years since I've grown morning glories back there. And this past year, I had one grow and bloom in that same area where I used to grow them. Another one to start outside direct sow is sweet peas. They grow taproot just like peas, and they are not fond of transplanting. Sweet peas can be seeded early, direct sown early outdoors. They germinate at a lower soil temperature, and they prefer to grow in cooler soil. They're cold hardy, and they grow pretty fast once they do germinate. I thought I'd talk about wildflower mixes as well because they seem to be a popular choice among people who want something easy. These are meant to be direct sown, but they can be a bit of a gamble, and I personally would not recommend them. Yes, they do seem easy and they are cheap. You know, that might be your first clue. You have to read the back of the package and find out what exactly is included in there. It is generally listed as Latin names. Let's take a look at one. This is from Mackenzie. One of the better blends, I guess, I would say, considering many other blends have invasive or very weedy seeds in it. But this particular one would be easily available at the racks in home improvement stores. It's a big bag for about 10 bucks. First of all, I'm just going to make note here that 75% of the bag is noted as vermiculite, so it's not this big bag full of seeds. Now, I'm not saying adding vermiculite is a bad thing. I just want to point out that you aren't getting this really big bag full of seeds. 75% of it is vermiculite. The first one that's listed is Calendula officinalis, and it is a good annual for direct sowing. This will give you flowers the year that you plant it. The next one is Gypsophilia elegans, and that's an annual form, and it is not the invasive form. Gypsophilia paniculata is always going to be the one that you have to be careful of. That's the invasive or noxious weed. Cheiranthus allioni is the Siberian wallflower, and that is a biannual. This will not flower in the year it is sown, but will flower the following year. This plant is in the cabbage family and will probably be decimated by flea beetles if you have that problem where you live. Next one that's listed is Cosmos bipinnatus, which is the tall flowering common cosmos. Next is Lupinus perennis, and these are the blue flowering perennial lupins. They won't flower in the year they're sown, and chances are very high it will die over winter, as they're noted as reliably hardy only to zone 5. Next is Melope trifida. It is a beautiful annual flowering melope, and it's too bad that it seeds out absolutely terribly. I would not plant this in an urban yard. I wouldn't plant it in my yard. Cynoglossum amabili are the Chinese forget-me-nots. Delphinium consolida are the annual part of the Delphinium family, commonly known as larkspur. That one you will get flowers in the year that you sow the seed. Another Cheiranthus, this one is Cheerii, which is another wallflower. And it is still, of course, in that cabbage family and will be susceptible to flea beetle damage if you should have that problem. If you're in an area where there are canola crops being grown, you need to pay attention to anything that is going to be susceptible to flea beetles. Chrysanthemum maximum is the Shasta daisies. Some Shasta daisy are perennial in zone 3, some are not. Chances are this one probably would be. Most of them are very prolific self-seeders. Chances are there would not be blooms the year that you sow the seed, or they would be very late in that year. Coreopsis tinctoria is often called the plains coreopsis. It's more commonly known as tickseed, and it is native to Western Canada. It is a fast-growing annual that will self-sow. All of these will self-sow. That is one of the reasons why they're called a wildflower blend. Dianthus barbatus is Sweet William, and it is a biannual, so it will not bloom in the year it is sown, but it is hardy and will bloom the following year, then set seed to grow for the year after again. The next one is California poppy. Then there are two varieties of flax. The first, Linum perenne, is perennial blue flax. It says it's perennial, but it's a very short-lived perennial in my experience. Better to expect it as biannual, or that it's going to flower for 2 years, and then you have to rely on seeding out. Linum grandiflorum rubrum is the annual red-flowered variety of flax. It's a very pretty plant, fast-growing from a May sowing, and would be blooming in your yard by mid-July. Papaver roas. These are poppies that go by a lot of common names like Flanders poppy or the common poppy, and they're probably going to be red. And the last one listed on here is Rudbeckia hirta. Rudbeckia rarely blooms in the first year it is sown unless it started early indoors. It may be biannual and bloom the following year. So this is really not a blend for John and Jane Doe to consider if they want a lot of nice blooming annuals this year. The other thing is you need to be able to identify each of those 15 different types of flowers as seedlings. Why do I need to know that, you say? Well, because you're still going to get normal weed seeds germinating in your soil along with those flowers. And if you wait until everything gets too big, it'll just turn into a big weedy mess, because weeds will successfully compete with the more desirable plants, and the weeds most often win. So you need to be able to identify those weed seeds as seedlings so that you can weed them out. So, my recommendation for John and Jane Doe, if they want that kind of mix, they are much further buying a package or two each of poppies and zinnia and dwarf marigolds and bachelor buttons, and maybe a package of annual baby's breath as a nice non-invasive filler. Then look at some photos online of what those 4 or 5 seedlings look like. That's all you need to know. Actually, poppies are very easy to identify. They even have a little bit of a silvery color to them generally when they first germinate. If you know those 4 or 5 seedlings, then you can assume anything else is a weed and you can get rid of it. In the wildflower mixes, with such a big mix of seeds, you have to be able to identify which is flower, which is a weed. And truthfully, some of those other wildflower mixes, they can turn into just a weedy mess because they do include seeds for less than desirable plants. So then, say you did buy those specific seed packages. You could mix them all up together with a cup or 2 of sand, vermiculite if you like. That works as, that's good too. Vermiculite holds a little bit of moisture. And after your soil has been properly prepared and raked, you need to level it a bit, and you need to remove any big stones or clumps. You would just broadcast sow that sandy seed mix over the bed and then lightly rake it in. I like to rake in with the tines down first, and then I flip the rake over and I rake with the back of the rake that kind of levels it a bit, and you can go one way and then another. Then I would tamp it down slightly with the rake tines kind of flat and facing downward, or you use your hands if you like. But the seed should make good contact with the soil, and then lightly water it in with a misty setting if possible, and don't let it puddle or don't saturate it. Don't make the seeds wash away. Just very gently, lightly water it until it's moistened pretty good, until I'd say the top couple inches or so are nice and moist. If that does take a little while, you do need to check and see how long that's going to take you to get to that with a misty setting. But I like a watering can with a fine rose on the end. That's my favorite method to water direct sown seed. But a misty setting on a hose is good too. I bought these annual seeds recently. I have a plan to do some direct sowing this year. So the first one I bought is bachelor buttons. These were oddly requested by Andy, so I don't know if he's trying to tell me something. And the next ones I bought are these amazing gray poppies. And I think these are beautiful. And I will get a few other packages of something that I can direct sow. Probably another poppy. There's another poppy that I'd like to add to that. And maybe a package of that annual baby's breath for filler. I also thought maybe just for something heavier in the mix that I would try Bells of Ireland as well. I have grown Bells of Ireland before when I grew and sold cut flowers, but Bells of Ireland are a sturdy, heavier looking annual for sure, so it might give some weight to this planting. And my plan is to direct sow these as a mix, just as I described earlier with some sand. Hopefully I'm going to get them down quite early over the area where we removed the 2 lilac shrubs last year, and we're going to be removing another one of those shrubs this year. The area is still under construction. It's eventually going to be a continuation of the rock garden, but I don't want to do right now, I don't want to do a lot of permanent planting or the rock placement in that area. Not just yet, because I need to make sure those lilacs are dead. Those are common lilac, and you know, they have a habit of sprouting or suckering somewhere else, and I just need to make sure that they're dead and they're not going to send up some suckers. So I'm just going to try and camouflage that area this year with a mix of these easy to sow annuals. I also have these zinnias, mentioned them before in a seed haul video, and I want to plant them together, but I'm going to pre-start these. There's very few seeds in these, so it's not like I can sow way extra or more than I need. I also have a plan for these in another part of the yard. Any package of seed that I direct sow will have plenty of seed because, as I mentioned, they're going to have a lower germination rate. So how do you know if you can direct sow a particular seed? You know, if the instructions on the back say to sow indoors 4 to 6 weeks in advance of the last frost, those are really good candidates for direct sowing. They're going to grow and bloom within our season. If the package says hardy annual or cool season annual, those are also great candidates and probably would prefer to be direct sown as opposed to starting them indoors. Now, any plants that say 8 weeks or more to start indoors could possibly be direct sown, but they're going to bloom quite late. Petunias will readily seed out, but those volunteers that seed out will probably begin to bloom by about August. So they are not good candidates to direct sow for early season blooms, but they're fine for late season blooms. Geraniums, as another example, are best started from seed indoors in January or February. I've had geraniums seed out outdoors only a handful of times, and those little plants start to bloom maybe in September, so not a good candidate at all for direct sowing. So there are flowers that need a warmer environment to germinate, and if that package says the seed needs soil temperature of 25 C or more to germinate, they aren't a good candidate for direct sowing. Remember, that is soil temperature and not the ambient or air temperature. Just because it's 25 C outside does not mean that the soil temperature is 25 C. Those types of seeds also prefer consistently warm soil, and the top couple inches of soil cools off quite rapidly at night, which stalls that germination process a bit. Some plants just don't like that temperature swing, but then at the same time, there are seeds that really benefit from that temperature swing. They prefer it. And those seeds are the ones that are normally referred to as hardy annuals or cool season annuals, and are most of what I mentioned before previously: poppies and larkspur, love and a mist, bells of Ireland, calendula. These can all be seeded early, as soon as the snow is gone or as soon as the soil can be worked, or, you know, perhaps even not quite. Direct sowing does rely on a certain amount of moisture, persistent moisture in the soil, and so getting these seeds down before the early rains or the late snows even is really beneficial. And at the same time, that temperature swing helps to break the seed coat and get those little seedlings rooting into the soil that is still fairly soft from the winter thaw and hasn't yet had that chance to get really hard and baked in the heat. On to the vegetables. You know, the vast majority of vegetables are best direct sown. Through the years, vegetable gardeners have sown massive productive gardens basically from seed alone. My mother certainly did, but maybe they start their own tomatoes and peppers or buy transplants from the garden center or greenhouse. Cucumbers, great, direct seeded, no problem at all. They do need a warmer soil to germinate, but I think it's 18 C, so it's not like it's really, really warm to germinate. They are frost tender, so they do need to be protected. They're not cold tolerant. But even still, plenty of people just direct sow cucumbers and do not bother with starting them indoors. They actually resent root disturbance, and you do need to take a great deal of care with transplanting them if you are going to start them indoors. I do usually start mine indoors. I'm not sure if I will this year, now that I'm going down to just growing 2 plants. I think that I could sacrifice more seed and just direct sow and try it that way. Early maturing cabbage, very easy to direct sow, no problem there. I've done that. All the root vegetables, radishes, carrots, beets, they're all best direct sown. Peas are best, just like sweet peas, best direct sown. Corn is best direct sown. When I grow corn, I usually pre-start it indoors about a month or so ahead of planting out, because I grow such a small patch, and so I just like to have it spaced out at what I want it and the area I want it right from the get-go. You know, corn, it is best to choose an early maturing variety. You don't want to grow a sweet corn that has a lot of, like, 120 days to maturity or something like that. So you do want to choose a good early maturing variety. There is one called Northern Super Sweet or something like that with Northern in its name, and that's usually a good one. Leafy greens, lettuce, spinach, arugula, chard, collards, all of those. All those seeds will germinate very well in cool temperatures. They prefer to grow in cool temperatures. There's actually more difficulty growing them in warm soil temperature. So the earlier you can get those directly sown from seed, the better off you are. Now, I've had plenty of volunteer tomatoes in my yard that produce fruit. I wouldn't recommend direct sowing, and I've never direct sown them intentionally, but like I said, I've had plenty of volunteers. They will germinate and grow quite readily and set fruit. I've let some volunteers just continue to grow to see what they do, and they do set fruit. Something like the early girl or subarctic varieties that mature in 50 days or so, or even less, would give you fruit just a little later in the season. Tomatoes do like warm soil to germinate, so direct sowing with some sort of cover could be beneficial. I may test that out this year. Subarctic plenty are said to mature and produce fruit in 42 days, and so, you know, maybe I'll try that. The last thing that is a common vegetable to grow are peppers. I grow peppers every year, and there's thousands of seeds that go into my compost. I've never had a pepper plant volunteer, so I would say they are definitely not a candidate for direct sowing, and perhaps they would germinate and grow probably if they were in a great environment, but to the chance of them then producing fruit, I'm going to say is probably pretty slim. There's a lot of other vegetables that are perhaps less commonly grown, especially in cold climates, and so I won't get into those. I just really wanted to focus what Jane and John Doe could do in their vegetable garden in their backyard by direct sowing some seed and then being able to eat from that garden all summer long. So if you're feeling the pressure of indoor seed starting, just grab some seeds. Get some zinnias, some poppies, some bachelor buttons. Wait for the snow to melt or almost melt, and just get outside and sprinkle that seed around. Let me know in the comments what your favorite flower is to just sprinkle around and then have a great display. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it interesting in some way, and if you did, give me a thumbs up, tell your friends, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. I do appreciate you taking the time to watch this today, and I hope you're doing well. See you soon.